Okay, to remove these, sometimes you need just a little bit of help on the pinion, but you can see there's just splines in here, so it's kind of like a slip fit. You can see it wanting to rock, but the pinion gear here needs just a little bit of help. And I'm not prying very hard at all. It's just enough to get it to start coming loose. Alright. The next step here is to remove 6 cap screws that hold the cam plate on. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These 4 here are to retain the oil pump to the cam plate, so we're not going to take those off at this time. We just got to take our 3/16 Allen again and take these out. One thing that you're going to find too is this bolt here actually interferes with this hydraulic tensioner assembly. So you can crack it loose, but you can't quite get it out without, you know, forcing it. So I just turned it a little bit loose there, and then we'll move on to the rest of them, and we'll kind of ease that one out as the plate comes loose from the crankcase. Now these bolts are all the same length on the later models. Some of the earlier models had longer bolts here and here because there are dowel pins actually behind here, and so they need an extra longer bolt because the dowel pin takes away the threads in the case. So something to note if you're working on an older model. And so you can see the last bolt I got going here is the one that was interfering with that hydraulic tensioner, and it looks like it's going to come out without the cam plate forcing off. So now essentially the cam plate's loose. You can see it's ready to come out, and I got oil coming out because of course I've opened up some passages as I've pulled that plate away from the crankcase. So we'll let that drain here a little bit and pull it out. Now if my tappets are supported right, they won't fall in. It really just pulls out. Okay, so there's your oil pump and your suction side of the pump. So what we're going to be keeping here, of course, is the oil pump, the cam plate, the hydraulic tensioner on each side, and then we'll discard essentially just this cam and this cam here, and we're going to reuse this chain. Okay, so the next step is to remove the cam bearings. This tool is an expandable mandrel type of a blind hole puller, if you will, and it just inserts in the cam bearing. And it's important that you use the right tools for this because it's very easy if you don't have the proper tool to ruin the bearing, and if the bearing comes apart while you're trying to remove it, it can of course fall into the crankcase, and that means the whole motor's got to come out and be separated so that you can get the debris or the parts that fell in out. So make sure you have the proper tools. This particular tool is a Kent Moore tool, a Harley-Davidson tool. There are several manufacturers of tools. You can get them many different places. So we put the support plate on here. It just has some thumb screws to hold it in place. It always works best if you put the support plate on. Okay, we got all them tight. Now we need a thrust bearing and a nut installed on there. Thrust bearing is just to make it easier to turn, so that as it pulls the bearing out, it reduces the friction. And I just install that loosely so that I can feel the tool center on the bearing when I tighten it down. This tool takes 2 7/16 inches, one to hold it from spinning, the other one to expand the mandrel inside. Just making sure I'm centered in the bearing. That's good and tight. Okay, so now I'm just tightening the tool, and it's pulling the bearing right out of the crankcase bore. Okay, so now that we've got the old bearing out, we're going to go ahead and open up the hardware kit, installation kit from the S&S packaging, and we get out the new bearings. The difference between the stock bearing and the S&S bearing is this bearing has a cage in between the rollers, and there are less rollers in there, and so this would be more supportive of the cam. And as well compatible with the materials that the cam are made out of. So we of course, anytime you're installing a cam, whether you have 0 miles or 100,000 miles, we still recommend replacing the bearings. So what we have here is the cam bearing installation tool, and these are the brand new bearings from S&S. They basically just slide over this mandrel or arbor, if you will. And this is the same plate that we use to remove the bearings with, so we have a different arbor that threads in here to install the bearings. Okay, so when you're getting set up to do this, important thing to note is that there are letters and of course like a part number on the outside of the bearing. You want that to be on the outside or facing out as you press it in, because if you look at this cage and bearing close, what you'll see is that this is thicker and stronger than the inside, so you don't want to push on the side that isn't supported. So you always want to have the numbers out. That's the important thing to note here. So I got them both on here. I've adjusted the length of these so that the bearings, when I slide this in here, they can't fall off and of course get lodged down in the cam chest. So I just put the bearings on there, slide everything into place, and put my thumb screws on. One thing too that I guess is important to note here, this bike only has 1,800 miles on it, and we're not going to replace the tappets, but I guess I would recommend that if you have a bike that's around 30,000 miles or higher, replace the tappets. And the tappet replacement is really simple, I guess. You would just take these 4 screws off these tappet covers, remove the tappet covers. Of course, you'll need a gasket for that. And there's a dowel pin in here that retains the tappet from spinning. That just lifts straight out of there, and you pull the tappets right out the top, put the new ones in, put your dowel pin back in, put on your new gasket and your 4 cover screws, and that's the only thing in addition to what we're doing here to replace tappets. So really simple process. Of course, you would want to use assembly lube when you put the tappets in and that kind of stuff, as we're going to do here when we put the cams in. So now I got my plate on, and basically you just run these 2 mandrels in. It's not a bad idea, of course, to visually look inside here to see that they are aligned with the bores. And this looks good here, so I'll just take my wrench and run them in. Now, the arbor on the end of this threaded piece actually has a step on it so that it puts the bearing in roughly 20 to 30 thousandths past flush. And so it's got a predetermined install height, if you will, in the case to get that bearing centered on the cam journal. And now it's obviously seating because it's getting quite a bit tighter than what it was going together. So I just break it loose so it's not pushing on there, and I go on to the next one.